Hi everyone, welcome to our first Google Hangout with so many amazing teachers who are watching this streaming on YouTube right now. We have with us Elizabeth, wave.
Wow.
Sundar.
Hi.
I'm Maureen, and we also have the amazing Peter McIntosh. Peter, can you introduce yourself?
I'm not sure about the amazing part.
Turn your mic on, Peter.
Is my sound on?
Oh, we can hear you, sorry.
Okay, yeah. I'm Peter from Oakland Unity High School in East Oakland, California.
Excellent. Peter is one of our fabulous pilot school teachers. He was using Khan Academy all of last year, saw tremendous success, and he's going to take some time today to share with all of us how he has actually been using Khan Academy in his classroom and how his implementation model has evolved and what they're doing now. So, Peter, we're going to give you the floor in just a moment. A few housekeeping rules or things to know. So, if you do have any questions, please use the Google Moderator link. That is our way of hearing your voices. And if you have any comments, feel free to comment right directly onto the YouTube video. We also have a list of about 40 questions that are already on Google Moderator, and we definitely intend to answer those questions after we give Peter a little time to talk about Oakland Unity. So we've bucketed them into 5 different groups. We're going to talk about implementations, analytics, features, community, and then sort of miscellaneous type questions. So be prepared to hear those answers after our time with Peter. And I think at this point we are ready to hand the floor over to Peter.
Okay.
Oh, and also, sorry, Peter, one quick mention that for those of you who are joining us live via YouTube, just know that we cannot hear you. So please use the Google Moderator as a way to ask your questions. Go for it, Peter.
Okay. Well, just by way of context, my high school is a 4-year high school. We are a charter school, and we are in a difficult urban environment. So I think a lot of our experience, a lot of things we've learned, a lot of things that work for us may be quite different than situations found in other schools, elementary school applications, middle school, schools in a different social environment, public school versus private school versus charter school. I think all these things are really big factors. So just as context, I'm coming from a very special area, and this is what we know here. And to understand what we're doing, the success we've had, the way we've implemented it, let's start out with the fact that our kids come to us with a very special set of problems. Our incoming freshmen typically have taken algebra at least once in 8th grade, but come to us really not knowing any algebra. We give them incoming tests in the summer before their freshman year with an average score of some 17% on a kind of a slimmed-down version of an algebra final. And they also score maybe 60% on a test of just real basic calculations, positive, negative numbers, fractions, long division. So by any measure, they come to us with a serious content gap. But more importantly, what we notice is they come to us with a real problem in their academic character, their approach to learning. They have no real sense of responsibility for their learning. They've gotten through years of middle school not really knowing their arithmetic, not really doing their arithmetic homework, but somehow passing, sometimes getting quite good grades. So they really don't have a sense that if I don't do my work, I'm going to fail. They just have this sense that whatever comes, they're going to pass. So they do come to us with a sense of almost entitlement. It'll come easy. They don't have to work, so they don't work oftentimes. They tend to want to tune out in class, and they tend not to always want to work very hard. And they also have relatively low confidence. So it's a very difficult group of kids to work with. And in the past, we've had a lot of difficulty. Regardless of how we presented the material, they really wouldn't do their homework. So no matter how we deliver the content, they weren't putting in any effort to really absorb and retain the content. we stumbled on Khan quite literally as we were trying to find a way to get our kids back to basics and really focus on them taking responsibility by doing their homework. They were doing more homework, but they were copying it in other ways of sort of pretending to do it. And we realized that Khan had some exercises. And honestly, the only thought we had was we'd have a normal class delivery of material, and we'd just have have Khan as a homework mechanism, assign them exercises because they couldn't copy because problems were randomly generated and they were not multiple choice, so the kids really couldn't just guess their way through. And that's what we did initially. We actually didn't really have a separate classroom for Khan so much as we had a time where they could do Khan as a way of doing their homework. And then in my classroom, we taught them in a regular way. And as the kids were working on it, we began to see, yes, they were doing work, but we also began to see much more engagement. And we were kind of surprised to see how much engagement was happening. To the extent the kids were really working quite hard, spending a lot of time trying to struggle with problems. And this is something we were just not used to. And so as we got deeper into it, we realized that Khan really had an ability to get these kids more focused on their math. So I said, so initially, Khan was in a separate classroom with a teacher that guided them, but in my classroom was a conventional classroom, basically delivering a traditional lecture on math. We had two classrooms, two periods effectively in a day, as our approach to helping the kids through their content gap, giving them a double dose of math, with that one dose being me with a math lecture, and the other one being a period where they can effectively do their homework but do it on Khan. And the results were really quite remarkable. And we went from having, our state scores, our California CST scores, someplace in the range of, to 20th percentile in the state, to this period of having, double math, but with half of it being on Khan, we zoomed up to like the 74th percentile. I mean, quite a major improvement. And the more we looked at it, the more we realized that Khan was really an important part of this success. I mean, obviously, a second period of math helped, and the fact we were emphasizing fractions and things like that helped. But it was the ability of Khan to somehow, we have to almost seduce the kids into paying attention, into doing their work.
So it sounds like y'all were able to use Khan Academy effectively to sort of replace homework. You had a learning lab type model where students were on computers during one part of the day, and then in your math class during a second part of the day.
That's correct, initially.
Can you talk a little bit about how the model has changed for this year?
Well, a couple things. First, we had so much success with Khan, and probably the most telling aspect of it was I'd come over to a child who was working on Khan, and they were struggling with a problem that I had maybe delivered a lecture on earlier in the year. They obviously had absorbed nothing from me. They were working on a Khan problem, maybe taking a hint or getting an explanation from me or another student, coincident with their focus on this problem right now. And the timeliness of that help, however they got it, from Khan or from a student or from me, worked. And it just clicked to us that the immediacy, the one-on-one aspect was really, really successful. We were very lucky in getting some donations to get some more computers. We added computers to my classroom. So this year, we're basically in both classrooms, full-time Khan. So in this year, we have one classroom that's what we call our learning lab, where they're basically working on assignments, working on exercises. In my classroom, there's a little more guidance. I'll tend to put up 2 or 3 problems at the beginning of the period that are sort of on a timeline moving through the curriculum that are general examples. The kids will work on them on paper and pencil. I maybe explain them briefly, but then the tablets come out. We use small tablets, and they start working.
Cool, very neat. Well, so that's actually a great transition into all the different types of implementation models out there. I know quite a few of the questions on our Google moderator ask specifically how are teachers using Khan Academy And I just wanted to screen share a part of our toolkit that goes over this. And as I'm doing this, if you have any questions specifically for Peter, please use our Google moderator. Let me screen share my computer. There we go. So for those who are interested in the different types of implementation models, if you go to khanacademy.org/toolkit, you can see that this is our teacher toolkit, and it has a lot of resources. And there's this one question on the left that says, how can I implement in my classroom? If you click there, you can see that there are four different ways to start using Khan Academy in your classroom. And as Peter showed, implementation models change and evolve over time. I know at Oakland Unity, as Peter said, they started as a learning lab, and sounds like now they have both a learning lab and a classroom that's pretty interactive as well. So if you have questions about particular implementation models, I would encourage you to watch these videos. We also had a bunch of questions about just sort of becoming more familiar with the site. I just wanted to show you, if you go to khanacademy.org and you're not logged in, if you scroll down, there's this video on how to use Khan Academy, and Sal actually walks you through the different parts of our site. This is really useful for a new student or even a new teacher who's really curious about everything that Khan Academy has to offer. And again, our toolkit will have a lot of resources as well in terms of logging in, how to get started, how the classroom will change, etc. I did want to talk a little bit about a very specific type of implementation model, because we did have a few questions specifically about classrooms that have 90, 100, 200 students in it, and that's this interactive classroom model. And we do have a school right now that is doing this. It's we have a few schools actually. I'm gonna put my face back up here. So one of those schools is Summit, which is a charter school located in San Jose, and they have right now a huge room of about 200 students. And they have 4 primary math teachers and then 2 assistant teachers that sort of help guide the classroom. They also have breakout rooms. And so in that room of 200 students, they're 9th and 10th graders who are all working at their own pace throughout the school year in math. And we're really excited about that. I think there's also Marlboro. Elizabeth, you want to talk a little bit about what's happening there?
Sure. So Marlboro is an all-girls private school in Los Angeles, and last year they did a pretty radical implementation of Khan Academy. They had students from 7th through 12th grade studying pre-algebra through calculus all in one classroom with one teacher. It was a pretty inspirational model to see students mentoring each other across math levels and across ages, and really having the flexibility to remediate on something they'd forgotten or to go ahead if they were able to do that. And this year they're doing a slightly different version of that, still with students working across grade levels and across math levels on different types of math concepts and having some self-paced learning as well. There's also another school, DCP, Downtown College Prep, which is a charter school here in the Bay Area, that's doing something similar to what Maureen described at Summit, but with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And we're sure there's lots of other examples of this happening as well, and we'd love to hear about them. So if you're doing something similar to this, please let us know. You can share with us in the toolkit under that implementation models page that Maureen showed before.
Sort of related to the implementations as well, was a question on logins. I mean, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about logins, but there was a question on under 13 logins. This was from somebody, Cindy in Waynesboro, I think. The question was about, if you're under 13 and you actually are not able to use Google Apps right now, how can you use Khan Academy? Our recommendation is really for under 13, Google Apps is the best way. However, if you can't use Google Apps, there is another way to use as well. It is not through Gaggle, as the question asks. But I would get your school department to try to go with Google Apps as much as possible because it is free and it can be set up in about 2 weeks or so. But however, for whatever reason, if your school cannot use Google Apps, there is a little bit more onerous way for students under 13 to use Khan Academy, and that is by creating their own Khan Academy account. But first, their parent has to sign up and create an account for the parent, and then the parent can add multiple child accounts. And in the video and in that toolkit that Maureen just shared with you all, there is a section on how do I get started, and in how do I get started, there is how do I get my under 13 students signed up in Khan Academy. That explains both Google Apps for Education as well as getting your parents to sign up, getting the students' parents to sign up for that. Actually, I had a question for Peter as well, which sort of relates to implementation. Peter, can you share with us a little bit about what kind of impact this has had? You mentioned about behavior and students taking ownership, but in terms of learning outcomes, can you share with us what Oakland Unity has experienced in terms of learning outcomes?
Sure. But just real quick too, this point about the larger rooms. We are opening a new building in about 2 years, and we are planning to have a large room. We call it our call center, our math call center, with probably 100, maybe 120 seats as well. The whole point being that as students differentiate themselves and we decide that one student belongs maybe lower on the algebra spectrum, another one higher, or algebra 2, we can have more differentiation without tearing apart the master schedule and having too many kids tracked. This allows them to sort of still be going through their classes with their cohort, but come into a room where there's an awful lot of differentiation that's possible, and with a couple different teachers, and it's just be a much more flexible approach, and we're very excited about that. So back to learning outcomes. Over the last several years, we've said our kids always have been coming into us with very low scores on their initial test. So we've seen no differences in the last several years on incoming scores, but remarkable changes on our tests throughout the year and on our state test. We're seeing increases in our averages on the tests we give every section or chapter in the old books, but we still give them the same paper test with Khan. And we're seeing increases in the means, the averages, in the range of 30 and 40%. And we're seeing increases more significant than that in the number of students that are scoring in the upper ranges, up in the 80+ range percent. We're seeing as many as 50% more students reaching up into the 80% range than we've been using Khan. And on the state test, before Khan, going back a couple of years, we were down at the 20th percentile in the state in algebra. We moved up to about 74th percentile just by focusing more on the basics, but without Khan. And then with Khan, we just moved up recently to the 94th percentile in the state. So, and we think actually moving from the 74th to the 94th percentile was almost a bigger move than going from 20th to 74th.
Wow.
So we've had some very significant increases. And I think an awful lot of it is very much related to Khan. But the one point I would emphasize, we do not think of what we're doing as a Khan project. We don't even think of it as a technology project. We really consider it our back to basics project, our character project. We have greatly focused on improving the character of our kids, their responsibility. It's just that online learning, and Khan in particular in our implementation, has been the perfect tool to focus on the responsibility and the effort. And so we have not focused on the fact we're implementing Khan. We are implementing better character, and it really has worked.
Thanks for sharing that, yeah.
Do you want to share any more questions? I think we covered most of them. And if we don't get to your questions, we'll be sure to create video answers afterwards as well.
Analytics?
Sure, yeah. I wanted to cover a few more questions pertaining to some of the analytics on our site. There were 2 or 3 questions really specifically wanted to get into how students get into review. When is a student struggling? How do we identify struggling students, etc. So I'll try to go over that a little bit. And And to do that, I actually want to again do a screen share and show you, some of the things that. Let me see that right there. Yeah. So you now see my screen, hopefully, and then. So as a coach, you probably go to the coach tab quite often, and one of the questions really asked about, what are the different colors here on the top right? There is started, there's proficient, there's review, and struggling, and it's fairly the student really moves from one color to the other in the following manner. They usually are no color at all, which means they're not working on that particular concept at all. If they start working on it, they go into start it, which means the light blue color that you see. And typically from the light blue color, what they end up in is one of two different things. They either stay in light blue till they become proficient, which means they go to dark blue. And proficient means we have a fairly strong belief that the student has actually learned or mastered this concept. Or they might go from started to struggling. And what happens in this case is the student has actually started working on it, but if they've done sufficient number of problems and still are not getting it, for whatever reason, they might have been taking hints, they might have been taking, watching videos, etc., but they're still not getting enough questions right. And I'll tell you what proficient means in a second. And then they go into struggling. And this might be a good place for teachers to intervene. And then once they intervene, students may actually move from struggling to proficient eventually. And then once they're in proficient, over time they keep oscillating back between review and proficient just to make sure that they stay abreast of what they've learned in that particular skill. And now I want to go a little bit into how we determine struggling, how we determine proficiency, and how we determine review. So struggling really comes from, and I'm going to switch over to the video here. Struggling really comes from the fact that students really we've been actually tinkering around with the algorithm for this, but right now the algorithm is fairly constant for all of our different skills in the exercise knowledge map. So, for instance, right now, struggling is when a student has done approximately 3 stacks worth of problems. So that is 24 problems in specific exercise. So whether they do it on a specific exercise or whether they do it as part of a topic. And again, we can talk a little bit about topic and exercise. Either way, if they've done 24 to 30 problems and they've still not attained proficiency, then we actually provide a signal to the teacher saying that maybe it's now a good time for the teacher to intervene and see what's happening with this particular student on this particular exercise. So that is how struggling is determined. Now, proficiency, the way proficiency is determined is actually a fairly sophisticated algorithm that we can actually tweak behind the scenes, and it can change from exercise to exercise. And the way we do it is we try to determine, based on how a particular student is doing on an exercise, what is the probability that we think they're going to get the next problem right in that exercise. And the way we determine that is to compare the trajectory of a given student, a student who's working on that exercise now, with the corpus of students in Khan Academy who work with that exercise. So, for instance, if a student has done, coming in, starting to work on the exercise, and he's done 5 or 6 problems in that exercise and gotten it right, then we know, we compare it to the corpus and we get a good sense that this person is coming in knowing this particular problem. And we deem them proficient because even though they only did 6 problems, they got 6 in a row right. Over time, the speed in which they get the answers right will factor into proficiency and so on and so forth. On the other hand, a student might come in and actually, takes several problems. They get the first one right, and they get the next few wrong, and they get a few right, a few wrong, and so on and so forth. We then compare that trajectory with all the other students who've been working on that exercise, and then determine that this student is not actually progressing in the same pace that the general corpus is moving. And then we can use that to determine whether or not this the student is proficient. So if they get a few wrong right off the bat, it's going to take them longer to get proficient. They'll have to do more problems to actually show that they're proficient. So what this means is it gives a signal to Khan Academy that they may not know, so we actually turn the onus back on them to prove that they actually know. So it takes a little while longer for them to get proficient there. So that's how proficiency is calculated. And then eventually, review, how does the student get into review? And this is also determined by how they got proficient in the first place. If they actually get proficient really quickly, then we throw them into review much less frequently. If they struggle and eventually get proficiency, that means they just learned the concept, and we probably would put them into review sooner, so within a week of getting proficiency. In some cases, within a few days of within getting proficient, we might actually put them back in review. And once in review, all they have to do is show that they can get the next problem right, and if they get the next problem right, they're back into proficient again, and then it oscillates back and forth between review and proficient, and it exponentially decays at how fast we actually throw them back into review. If they start becoming proficient, the slower we'll actually put them back into review. So students who are now familiar with advanced topics don't have to review basic topics again. So that's the general gist of how our proficient, struggling, and review algorithms work. And that was actually one of the key questions that folks asked. I know Peter has a question.
Well, Sundar, just actually a comment, and it's an interesting aspect about proficiency and your algorithm. So the students get it that it can take longer or shorter amount of time to get to proficiency. And they grumble a lot when it takes a long time. And this actually has played wonderfully into our whole focus on improving their character. One of the problems our students have is they check out. So they're doing problems on a paper test, for instance, maybe even on a Casey test, and they don't really pay attention as they're working. They've developed very careless habits. So they enter con, and they recognize it could take longer or shorter, and so we simply tell them this: look, we don't want you to spend a lot of time getting this. We want you to get done and move on. So take out a piece of paper, do the problems carefully, check your work, and avoid careless errors so you don't have to go through the process of doing many extra problems. He's like, oh, that's a great idea. Never thought of that. So all of a sudden, we're actually working on this whole concept of being attentive and taking seriously the work you're doing. And from their perspective, they're just trying to avoid a penalty of having to do extra problems. And it's actually having a really great effect.
Great. Great to
thanks
hear.
for sharing that, Peter. Actually, there's a follow-up question on the comment stream here on YouTube as well about proficiency from one A. Hansi. And the question is really, I mentioned that if a student is proficient in advanced topics, they shouldn't really be thrown into review on some of the basic topics just a few minutes before. And the experience here seems to be that students proficient in calculus, but the review seems to be popping up on telling time on a clock. Typically that shouldn't happen. However, let me actually go behind the scenes a little bit and explain what's happening. So if you look at our knowledge map, there are prerequisites, and there's actually paths to different areas in the knowledge map. So if calculus is not directly connected to telling time, then from the algorithm's perspective, it's considered as two different, very distinct sets of topics. And so even though a student is proficient in calculus, it might actually put them in review on what seems like a more basic concept. But if you take a step back and look at it as, somebody doesn't need to know how to read time on the clock to actually do calculus. Although it's highly unlikely, it's possible, and that's why it shows up that way. Having said that, though, there might be some of these prerequisites that we can tweak and make it much better. And so, if there are issues like this, we highly recommend teachers to actually report a problem to our site. There's a link called Report a Problem at the bottom. You can report a problem, and we can actually take things like this and kind of fix that as well. In this particular case, though, it does seem a little odd that the student in calculus is getting a review in time. But the reason there is time is not a prerequisite for calculus. That's the reason. So there are several questions and features. Elizabeth, do you want to take a crack at some of them?
Yeah, so we have a lot of questions about features that exist on our site now and how to use those. And we also have some questions about features that people would like us to build eventually. So I'll try to cover as many of those as possible. So to start with, we have some questions on how to log into our site. And it does seem like for a lot of people, there are some challenges with that. We got one from Brett in Boston about the challenge of adding many students and adding coaches. And what I would say about that is, as Sundar mentioned before, Google Apps for Education is a really great way to get your class started on Khan Academy. However, we do know that it's a little challenging to get started, especially with large groups of students. And we are working with some other organizations to try to create bulk uploads and faster ways to get your students logged on to Khan Academy in the future. So for now, please bear with us, and we hope that we'll have a better solution soon on that. And I think that might be a theme of a lot of the answers to the questions I'm about to cover right now, but hopefully we'll have some good answers to some of them. There's also a couple of questions about assessments. So can you create an assessment tool through Khan Academy where you can take some of our exercises and create a customized exam? And that's actually something else that we're working on right now, where eventually you'd be able to kind of create your own test from the resources we have on our site. Once again, we're not there yet, but we are working on that. We also have a question about how you can use the work on Khan Academy for grading. I think it's a really great question, and one that we're hoping to learn a lot more from the teachers that we're working with. And if anyone has great ways you figured out how to use Khan Academy with assessments and with grading, we'd really love to hear about it through our toolkit. A couple ideas, though, for now. A lot of teachers we've worked with have used Khan Academy as a participation grade. So if students are using Khan Academy or actively engaged in their own learning, they might get part of their participation grade associated with their work on Khan Academy. Another idea is to say that different students have different needs, as we all know, and a lot of teachers will set individual goals with their students and have students come to them and say, here's something that I think I should be working on. I'm struggling with fractions still, even though we're learning linear equations. I think I could use some extra time working on that. And maybe they'll set a goal for themselves to work on some Khan Academy fractions exercises that week. And they can actually set those goals directly on the site, or they can set them kind of in a notebook with the teacher. Other students might want to race ahead, and they might have a goal to explore some trigonometry or whatever might be ahead of your curriculum. And maybe if students are setting goals that you think are appropriate and then they're accomplishing them, that can also be graded as kind of a participation grade as well. So those are just a couple of ideas about how Khan Academy can be used with grading. There's lots of other ways that it can be done as well, and we really welcome anyone to share suggestions on that.
So there's a question here, Elizabeth, on using the exercises, and if the student is doing exercises, is it possible for them to, in the middle of doing one of the exercises, to go back to one that they're reviewing and do that? Can you talk a little bit about that in Power Mode, perhaps?
Yeah, so someone had a great question about that. So Power Mode is what happens when you're doing a bunch of different problems on Khan Academy all at once and trying to get that context switching in. And so what would happen is, say you're working on a certain set of problems and a student realizes that, here I am struggling with a particular concept. It's a little advanced for me, and actually I think I could use some more basic problems now. Students can definitely do that. At any time, anything on the whole site is available to anyone, and we highly encourage students to really build that awareness of their own work on Khan Academy and go ahead and go back and work on something simpler. Even if you're already proficient in something, you can always go back and do more problems in it. So there's really no reason why students wouldn't be able to kind of go back and help themselves with that.
So the answer is to use Power Mode and go to a topic, essentially. Sorry, I'm probably using the word Power Mode, which is not really, but it's really doing exercises at a topic level. So is that the way to do it? And they do it as a topic. If there are reviews, they automatically pop up in the middle, and they don't have to wait for an entire topic to be completed before they do reviews. Is that right?
Right, exactly. So we try to have some intelligence built into the site such that if a student is struggling with a particular topic, we'll give them more of that type of problem. And if a student, can you see me now?
Yeah.
If a student is doing well with basic things, we'll kind of move them on to more advanced topics. But we're not perfect by any means. We're trying our best to make sure that the way that we show students problems is based on prerequisites and is done in a way that's intelligent. But we're not always perfect. In fact, we're often not perfect. So if students think that we're wrong and that the problems we're giving them are too hard or too easy, we'd really encourage students to kind of help themselves and also to use that report a problem feature that Sundar mentioned to let us know so we can try to make that better.
So there's one more question here on features. There's actually several questions here on features. There's one that actually caught my attention that I thought I could bring up. It's about goals, and we have this feature called goal setting on Khan Academy that several schools use. I know Oakland Unity has been using them as well. The question here is, there's a feature with 80 students using Khan. Is there a way to add a common goal to all students versus the students adding goals themselves? I think the conflict really is, who's driving the learning? Is it the teacher pushing the learning of the students, or the students driving the learning themselves? So
yeah. That's a good question. So you can set goals on Khan Academy, and right now we have that completely in the hands of the student. The reason for that is largely philosophical. We really like the idea of Khan Academy being a place where students are in control of their own learning, where they're the ones who are coming up with their goals and setting them. And so we really want the student to be creating his or her own goals. However, we know that it would be a lot easier for a lot of teachers and students if teachers could at least suggest a goal to students. So that would still put the learning in the hands of the student, because the student would still have the opportunity to accept that goal or not. But it would also allow teachers to kind of create assignments or suggestions, and that is something that we're looking into and hopefully we'll be able to have available soon on the site. Another kind of related question is...
Elizabeth?
Yeah, Peter? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to. Yeah, I want to just chip in there on both the topic of teacher-generated goals and grading. We've actually found some stuff that works reasonably well that some teachers might find pretty useful and easy to implement. We actually create a syllabus for our courses, and we have the list of all the exercises the students will be working on throughout the semester. And we lay them out in a rough chronological order, the sequence we think students should follow. And it's also basically the schedule of how we will cover these topics in our daily warm-ups. And some students, of course, do zoom ahead and go faster, and some lag a little bit behind that, but most of them tend to follow reasonably close to that. And effectively, that's the set of our common goals that we're laying out. And again, some students do then drift off and do other things they're interested in or want to move ahead. As far as grading, in any given week, we might be assigning anywhere from 5 to 10 exercises based on the complexity of that work. And we simply will do a grade based on how many of those exercises they complete. So for week 1, if there were 7 and they finished 6, they would get that percent for their homework grade for week 1. And then later on, and we'll do sort of sections throughout the semester, maybe after about 3 or 4 weeks, we'll give them a test, a written test on all the various things we've covered. And at that point, we'll go in and again check all of their con exercises through those 4 weeks on a cumulative basis. So they may have been a little bit slow in week 1 or 2, but if they eventually caught up, they get another grade, maybe weighted more heavily because it's for the entire month of exercises. And if they've actually then, at that point, completed, they get another grade for all the comprehensive work. And the students are reacting well to it. And it seems to be a way that we can guide them in what they're doing and give them a grade for the work they're doing. And it's worked out pretty well.
So, Peter, just a quick question on that. It sounds like, well, I know that in your classroom you often give students a list of exercises, or students know exactly which exercises to do throughout the school year. What happens if a student is really motivated, or just something turns on and they want to move at a rate that's quicker than everyone else? What does that student do?
Well, we're actually starting a project. We're sort of loosely calling it Set My Children Free, with the basic concept of, well, setting them free. And we actually think that we have a number of students, maybe quite a few students in our freshman algebra that can complete freshman algebra, maybe even geometry in 1 calendar year. So right now, the way that's looking, we have many students that are, beyond, where we would expect them to be in mid-October, and they're up into the end of the first semester almost. And we think they will probably get close to finishing the exercises, putting us in the scramble mode now to figure out how to be sure we can then say they are completed, and we'll give them credit for the whole first semester. So we're coming up with a way of giving them assessments on a kind of a free-form timeline. And what we hope to do is have a way of giving them periodic quizzes on the topics as they're going along, almost as a speed bump, to be sure they're not just racing through, pausing, thinking it through, and then give them assessments about once every, 4 or 5 times during the semester. So at that point, they'll have a body of work of con exercises and these assessments, and that will constitute a full body of work. So we're scrambling to come up with a way of doing this, including putting pressure on you all to, hurry up and do your online assessments. I think would be very helpful. We are also doing some work with the online assessments using the data director system. We're playing around with that. So we're doing a lot of different things. And the other thing we're doing now, and we have some cautious optimism about this, is we're going to open up a second Khan account for our students. We've now gone on to Google Apps for our school. The kids have their own Khan accounts now through Gmail. We're going to create a second account, but used just for testing and assessments. So we'll go in and ask for a quiz, for instance, assign them to do a particular exercise, and then grade them on the ability to do that.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay.
Did you want to take a few more questions?
Sure, yeah. There are actually a few questions here that fall in the category of features or even miscellaneous questions. There's actually one question on are you going to allow teachers to actually add content or modify or subtract content as they seem most appropriate. And I really want to, and then there's actually a related question on how teachers can engage with students, when they are not in the classroom. So let me answer the question on, adding and subtracting content, etc. So we just recently launched a feature called tutorials. I mean, it's really there for certain topics, particularly in algebra, where a student, where actually Khan Academy is the one that creates, the tutorial. If you go to a specific exercise, let me try to see if I can share my screen and basically go from there. But if you look at it, is that okay? Yeah, if you want to, yeah, Elizabeth will share the screen and then we can look at that. So what we created is a tutorial, particularly in algebra, and what the tutorial does is provides a narrative, and it's not just all of algebra, right? It'll take a subtopic within algebra, say systems of equations, and within systems of equations, we'll have interleaving of videos and exercises. It'll start off with the motivation behind algebra, the beauty of algebra, which Sal does a couple of introductory videos on. Then there may be a video that hooks students into algebra that might come from Why Hearts playlist. And then we have students actually practice some very basic algebra concepts, and then go into more videos, and then switch back to exercises. And so there's a narrative that actually takes students through the concept of systems of equations, and we call that a tutorial. Right now, this tutorial is completely, it's very much in beta. We just launched it for a few topics just a month or so ago. And right now, all the tutorials that we've created so far has been created by staff on Khan Academy. One of our goals really is now to enable teachers to create these narratives and tutorials for their students. So this narrative could be something that a specific teacher, Peter, for instance, might say, this is the order in which I find my students might best learn systems of equations, and might actually create a narrative for that. So that would be the next step that we would take in the tutorials direction, right? What could happen after that is, Peter might say, how teachers are going to be able to add and subtract content from our site. So that's one aspect. Sort of related to that is also, our students, can teachers actually interact with their students outside of the classroom on Khan Academy? There is, you may have noticed that on every video, there is actually a whole bunch of discussion that happens beneath the video, where not just teachers, but almost anybody can comment on questions that students may have on that particular video. That's one way to interact with students outside the classroom. There's also other ways in which all of this can be bubbled up through that particular tutorial or particular topic, so you can have discussions on a particular topic. Now the question is, can these discussions be constrained just to your classroom, i.e. only the students you coach? And that is, again, a feature on the community side that we hope to add later on, but for now, it's still open to everybody. And over time, we'll actually start doing this just for your class and so on and so forth. And the responses to that doesn't have to be text. That can be videos that people make. And oftentimes, we've actually seen people also respond to questions that students have with videos that they make and actually put links to those videos as responses as well. So that's a couple of ways in which you can address the community question and having interacting with students outside of just the classroom as well. So those are some of the questions that that some teachers ask. There's one other question around reports that came up. Elizabeth, I don't know, it sounded like you wanted to make a point or ask a question. All right. So there was actually one other question on reports that I wanted to answer, and then hand it over to Elizabeth because we're 15 minutes away from the end of the hour, and I want to be respectful of our teachers' time as well. And the question about reports is there a way to actually get reports, in a custom date range, being able to download and sort them by, energy points or getting a CSV or an Excel report and then being able to pivot any which way you want? The short answer to that is yes. There is a lot of power that our APIs, Khan Academy APIs, provide that enable users of the API to actually pull the data for their students in any which way possible. The flip side of this, however, is that to work with APIs, you need your school's technology person to help write a utility or a tool to make it happen, and so on and so forth. So that is the hard part. However, we have a reference implementation of that particular API that we have built, and we sort of support it in an ad hoc fashion. I just want to set the expectations on this quite clearly. The idea is, our way in which we provide custom reports to students is through the API, and we want schools to really develop the custom reports themselves. But to help kind of get started on that process, we've done a reference implementation, and we support it sort of in an ad hoc fashion, which means we won't be able to devote as much energy and attention to this as we would to our core products. And the way you can access this, and you can see Elizabeth is actually sharing this, you can see that you can go to khan-report.appspot.com, and you can actually start, click on the class reports link there, which is the first link. And when you click on the class reports link, if you're not logged in as a coach on Khan Academy, it'll ask you to log in as a coach. And if you're logged in as a coach, then the class report link will actually send you an Excel report of the activities that your class has been doing. And you can, again, select this report for your entire class, for a class list, and so on and so forth as well. Like I said, this is a reference implementation of our API. You can do much more powerful things than what this reference implementation does. But this probably enables some of the teachers who have specific questions and how they can access reports in a different format than what we actually display on our site.
I just wanted to add to that as Sundar mentioned, this is something that works a lot of the time, but it's kind of built on top of our site. Sometimes doesn't work, so please be patient with us. The other point is that we really encourage teachers to look at the dynamic reports, because what we've noticed is that sometimes a student will really struggle and will kind of be seen at the bottom of the pack. But after putting in some extra work, taking some hints, spending some extra time on the site, working with the teacher, doing all kinds of things, that student will actually start to skyrocket ahead. And so we really encourage teachers to look at the dynamic reports and to recognize that students do kind of move around within the class. And so it can be really helpful to download data on your class for grading or to get a quick snapshot of how your class is doing at a moment in time. So we really encourage you to either do that regularly or to look at those dynamic reports and really expect that students will change their trajectory over time.
Yeah.
So a couple other points we wanted to address in this call. There was a question about projects, and I think that this is a question we're excited to see, because we know that projects are something that a lot of teachers are excited about, and we're really excited as well. One of the best things we've heard is that Khan Academy can free up class time for teachers and students to engage in more collaboration and in more projects. And so we actually have someone on our staff now named Carl who's making some projects. And we can show here, if you go to Khan Academy's site, you can see that we actually have a projects tab under science now. And we're showing off some really cool projects, how to build robots and how to actually take things apart and do some reverse engineering. And so there now is a section on our site for projects, and we really encourage you to check that out. We also now have a computer science section of our site, and I can actually share my screen with you, and you can see this now. So computer science is really exciting, because what we've tried to do with that is really encourage creativity and encourage experimentation, allow students to really check things out and be willing to try and fail at first, but then they'll eventually figure things out. And so our computer science section is kind of a project part of our site in and of itself, where you can see here, I'm sharing my screen now, and you can see that we have lots of different tutorials here, and you can actually create any sort of program. Here's a new program screen where you can actually see that I can create my own program right here. So here's kind of a blank canvas, If I wanted to, I could start coding here now. I have some guidance on documentation. And then if I got stuck, I could actually go back and watch any tutorial on how to draw in computer science, how to make things rotate, all kinds of different things. So there's a lot of really exciting things in computer science and in projects. We also have some links in our toolkit to a few different project resources that we encourage you to check out. And if you have other ideas of resources for projects, we'd love to hear about those as well. So actually within the teacher resources in our teacher toolkit, we have some information about projects, and I'm actually showing that part of our site right now. Here's this video on projects, and then a couple of project resources. And if you have other ideas on projects, please share them here in the comments. We'd really love to hear those ideas from you.
Great. So we're actually going to say bye to Sundar now. He has to take off, but we do have 10 minutes remaining, and I wanted to talk a little bit about community. We had quite a few questions on the Google Moderator about how teachers can communicate with others, how you can ask questions and get answers. And so there's one really great place to do this. And I'm going to share my screen now and show you a little bit of where to go. If you go over here to watch, you can see that there's a place for Coach Resources. So if you click on that, see if it'll take me there. My internet connection is okay. Once you click on Coach Resources, you can see a bunch of videos, including a lot of case study videos on different schools. And you'll notice that on this page, there's also a place for community questions. And this is a great place to ask questions and talk to other teachers who might have the answers. You can see Khan Academy at KIPP, or this kind of reaches a broader Khan Academy community. So you might have your questions answered by Khan Academy staff or even other teachers. So this is a great place to go.
Maureen, I just wanted to add one more point there, that the way that this works is if you actually go to the Coach Resources tab on our site and you ask questions under any of the videos that we have there, then we'll actually aggregate all of those questions and comments into that community questions feed that Maureen was showing now. So if you have specific questions, we really encourage you to check out those videos and ask them kind of on the appropriate themes. So if you had a question about logins, you might ask under the video on logins, and that's the best way for us to hear your questions and then to be able to respond to them.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Yeah, you can see here that underneath a specific video, there's a whole conversation. These conversations get rolled up into our topic page, which is where all of those community questions are, right here. So that's a great place to go for if you have a specific question. Of course, try to find it on our toolkit or on this playlist, watch the video, and if it's still not answered, you can ask it right underneath the question, or right underneath the video, and it will come right here. We had some other questions about if Khan Academy will be hosting a conference, how can you meet other teachers who are doing this? I just want to let you know that we are definitely thinking about this. I just want to, let me get back, let me turn off my screen share here. All right. We're definitely thinking about ways to start cultivating more teacher communities where you are, as well as virtually. So I would say stay tuned and don't unsubscribe from this email list, because this is going to be the main way that we reach you to let you know about future opportunities for more teacher community. And then finally, we had one great question about, how can we showcase what we're doing on Khan Academy? And there's a really great way to do this. Again, I'm going to share my screen here. If you go to our website, all the way at the bottom, you can see that there are these places to share your stories. And we'd love to know what's going on in your classroom, if you're having success, how your students are reacting. And this is just a really wonderful place to sort of submit your own testimonial. And then we would just encourage you to keep on doing what you're doing, whether that's hosting PD, talking to other teachers, presenting at conferences. We fully support all of that. So thank you so much for those of you who are already doing that.
I just wanted to quickly try to answer a couple more questions. I don't think we're unfortunately going to be able to answer all of them in this call, but there were several questions about people wondering how we can make sure that we let you know when we make changes to our site. So we're really constantly trying to work on our site, trying to improve things, and we know that you want to know when there's new exercises or new features. So we're going to commit, we're saying this right now live on YouTube, so we're going to commit to trying to blog more about the updated features on our site, as well as to share updates on the new exercises that we have. And actually right now in our toolkit, we do try to keep a running list of all of the exercises. So right now I'm going to try to share my screen with you, but if you go into the toolkit, you can actually see that we have a section on what does Khan Academy offer, and I'm going to just share this right now. So this is part of our toolkit, and we show the different features of our site, and you can see here there's this related links section, and you can see I'm kind of hovering over download a complete list of exercises. The point of this is that we do sometimes change the names of our exercises, hopefully to make them clearer and more intuitive, but that can also be a little bit confusing for you if you're used to certain names, and I see Peter smiling here because he's experienced this as well. And we got several questions about this. So we do try to keep this updated so that you'll see the most up-to-date names of the different exercises, the date that they were released, so you can actually sort this and see what are the exercises that were created since the last time you checked, as well as a description of the exercises. And they don't all have descriptions yet, but we hope to add them more over time. There was also a specific question about those abbreviations, abbreviated names of some of the exercises on one of the reports. And we'll start adding a field on this Excel spreadsheet for those abbreviations so that you can kind of map those more easily as well. So we hope that that helps. It's kind of a nitty-gritty question, but I know that it pertains to a lot of people. So just wanted to make sure that we covered that quickly as well.
Yep, and if you are interested in reading our blog and checking it to make sure that you know what the updates are, you can get to that by going to our website and the About section. Once you are there, there is an option to read our blog, and there's a specific school implementations blog as well. So that's a great place to go, even if you just want to find out about what we're doing or work in other schools. It's a great place to go.
Great. So I think that really covers it for us. Thank you so much to everyone who suggested, who had questions or who voted on questions. It looks like I might be frozen. Am I frozen on yours as well?
You are frozen.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just going to show Maureen's. Oh, here we go. There I am. Okay, so we just wanted to thank everyone so much for joining today, for submitting questions, voting on questions. We will try to answer all the questions we didn't get to, either through videos or through comments. And we'll figure out a way to do something like this in the future in a way that's helpful to you. So thanks for participating. Thanks for using Khan Academy and helping us to improve it. And we really look forward to learning more from you and your students. And thanks again to Peter for all you've done for Khan Academy and for joining us today as well. Thanks a lot.
So much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.